Mary Gallet was far more than a wealthy American heiress. She became a living symbol of the alliance between America's Gilded Age fortunes and the ancient aristocracy of Europe. With one of the greatest fortunes of her generation, she helped preserve a powerful Scottish dynasty, transformed a historic castle into an artistic masterpiece, and left behind a legacy that still survives today. But how did a reserved young woman from New York become one of the most influential American duchesses in British high society? And how did her wealth help reshape the future of an ancient noble house? This is the remarkable story of Mary Gallet, the American heiress who became Duchess of Roxburgh. Mary Gallet was born on October 6, 1878 in New York City into one of the wealthiest families of America's Gilded Age. Her father, Ogden Goelet, built an enormous fortune through Manhattan real estate investments, while her mother, Mary Wilson Gallet, moved comfortably within elite American and European social circles. From birth, Mary belonged to a world of immense privilege, refinement, and international influence. When her father died in 1897, she inherited a substantial portion of the family fortune, including valuable New York properties and investments that generated vast annual income. The inheritance made her one of the richest unmarried women in America. Like many wealthy American heiresses of the era, Mary became associated with the phenomenon of the dollar princesses, young women whose fortunes attracted European aristocrats struggling to maintain their estates and noble titles. But Mary stood apart from many of her contemporaries. She avoided scandal, preferred discretion over publicity, and cultivated an image of elegance and restraint that only increased her mystique. Educated in languages, etiquette, art, and American culture, she grew up traveling between the United States and Europe, preparing almost unknowingly for the role she would eventually assume within British aristocracy. By the turn of the century, newspapers described her as one of the most desirable heiresses in America. But Mary Gallet's fortune would become far more significant than society gossip alone. In 1903, Mary married Henry Innes Kerr, one of the most prominent noblemen in Scotland. Their wedding became one of the most talked about social events of the era. Held at St. Thomas Church on Fifth Avenue, the ceremony symbolized something much larger than a marriage between two individuals. It represented the merging of America's new industrial wealth with the ancient prestige of British nobility. Mary reportedly brought a dowry worth millions of dollars, one of the largest of the period. That wealth helped stabilize and preserve the Roxburgh estates, including the magnificent Flaws Castle, one of the grandest stately homes in Scotland. Like many aristocratic families at the beginning of the 20th century, the Roxburghs possessed enormous land and prestige, but faced growing financial pressure from taxes, maintenance costs, and changing economic realities. Mary's fortune offered more than luxury. It offered survival. Still, not everyone welcomed these American heiresses into British society. Some traditionalists feared that wealthy Americans were buying their way into the aristocracy and changing the culture of old noble families forever. But Mary adapted with remarkable grace. Rather than appearing flashy or overly ambitious, she earned respect through intelligence, refinement, and careful diplomacy. Over time, her marriage came to symbolize more than financial necessity. It became an example of how American wealth and British tradition could successfully merge during a rapidly changing era. When Mary became Duchess of Roxburgh, she inherited more than a title. She inherited the responsibility of preserving centuries of history. Flaws Castle, located near Kelso in the Scottish borders, was already an impressive estate. Originally constructed in the 18th century and later redesigned in a romantic baronial style, it stood as a symbol of the Roxburgh family's power and heritage. But Mary envisioned something greater. Using both her fortune and artistic sensibility, she transformed Flaws Castle into one of the most refined aristocratic residences in Britain. She filled its halls with European paintings, antique furniture, rare porcelain, and magnificent tapestries, including celebrated works from the historic Gobelin workshop of France. These tapestries, originally created for royal and aristocratic interiors, added extraordinary richness and prestige to the castle's interiors. Mary's renovations were not simply decorative. She reorganized rooms, improved interiors, and carefully curated the atmosphere of the estate so that every visitor experienced a sense of elegance, community, and grandeur. In many ways, she treated Flore's castle not only as a family residence, but as a living museum. Her efforts helped preserve the estate during a period when many great aristocratic houses across Britain were declining or being abandoned altogether. Through art, design, and preservation, Mary Gallet transformed wealth into cultural legacy, and that legacy still survives today. For years after their marriage, Mary and Henry remained without children. In aristocratic society, this became a growing source of speculation and concern. A noble title required an heir to continue the family line, preserve the estate, and secure the dynasty's future. Then, after nearly a decade of marriage, everything changed. In 1913, Mary gave birth to their only son, George Innes Kerr. His birth was celebrated throughout aristocratic society because it ensured the continuation of the Roxburgh lineage. George would eventually inherit both the title and the responsibility of maintaining one of Scotland's great noble houses. For Mary, motherhood became a deeply important role. She closely supervised her son's education and upbringing, ensuring he understood not only aristocratic traditions, but also the immense responsibility attached to the family name. Her vision extended beyond luxury. She wanted the Roxburgh legacy to survive in a modernizing world that was rapidly changing after the First World War. In many ways, Mary had already preserved the family financially and culturally. Now she had secured its future biologically as well. Mary Gallet died in 1937, leaving behind a legacy far greater than money alone. Her estate included millions of dollars in assets, along with an extraordinary art collection containing tapestries, paintings, furniture, and decorative masterpieces gathered throughout her life. Unlike many wealthy collectors whose possessions were later scattered through auctions, much of Mary's artistic vision remained connected to Flore's castle. Today, many of the interiors she helped shape still survive, allowing visitors to experience the atmosphere she created more than a century ago. But Mary's true legacy was larger than art or aristocratic glamour. She represented a unique historical moment when American fortunes helped preserve Europe's fading noble world. Her life became a bridge between continents, between old aristocratic tradition and new industrial wealth, between Scottish history and American ambition, between preservation and reinvention. More than 80 years after her death, Mary Gallet remains one of the most fascinating examples of the dollar princess phenomenon. Not simply because she was rich, but because she used that wealth to preserve history itself.